Make sure everything looks good here, and then we'll get started. All right, so welcome everybody. This was kind of thrown together last minute, kind of last night. Decided maybe it'd be kind of interesting to do a little bit of a live stream talking about this obvious, pretty historic moment where we have the first EF-5 in 12 years, and I have things that I would want to talk about because I was there for it. Wasn't necessarily in the right spot for it, but obviously this is a big moment. So I also wanted to bring in some of my other colleagues in the storm chase community over here. We've got Ethan from June 1st already going here. We've got Will from TornadoTRX. We've got Celton Henderson, and we've got Trey from Convective Chronicles. And we're going to just be kind of going over lots of different facets of this event. We're going to start by talking a little bit more just about the actual setup itself. And then we're going to go ahead and get more into the rating and damage and stuff like that. And I am far from an expert when it comes to a lot of these things. So we're going to have everybody be able to chime in and share their various expertise in each matter. But while we're still getting people in here, I did just want to talk briefly about just my relation with the EF scale when it was first implemented. As most of you know, the EF scale was implemented in 2007, and the first big event where we had our first EF-5 was May 4th, 2007, the Greensburg event. This was my first storm chase, my first true storm chase in the plains. We were actually on this cell in Northeast Colorado, but I vividly remember watching it unfold from the hotel room as we were getting battered by hail and in the wrong spot, but we didn't have any clue what we were doing back then. And I remember watching just the images unfold of the Greensburg EF-5, and we'll see, obviously some similarities in track here, and that's something, we can discuss later, but that's kind of where I first started with, being introduced to an EF-5. And then in the last 12 years where we've been in this drought per se, we have had tornadoes that have come somewhat close. One that I can speak to since I was there is the Rolling Fork tornado, which it was considered, potentially going over that EF-5 threshold. The Jackson NWS was actually really in touch with a lot of storm chasers, and they're using all sorts of different, they're utilizing all sorts of different resources, from storm chasers to engineers, structural engineers, to other research groups. But I have an interview with Logan. He works at Jackson NWS, and he was pretty much in contact with us for quite a while after the event when they were doing their post analysis. And it was this particular DI, I think it's the green apple florist, that was considered a potential EF-5 damage indicator. And it was basically because some of the surrounding structures were not equally as damaged, it was kind of deemed that maybe there was some other factors that led to the amount of destruction. But when I pulled up, most people are familiar with the the light rotating around the tornado video. This was our view as it was going into Rolling Fork, and obviously there's that light in question. That's kind of what this video focuses on. But you can actually hear an interview with Logan, and he discusses a bit more of kind of what went into their decision making in this video, if you guys are curious for that. But when I pulled into Rolling Fork after the tornado, actually this was where we parked when we kind of realized the level of destruction and the fact that there weren't any emergency services there yet. And I remember going to the neighborhood that was back behind here. That was, most of these homes were given EF-4 rating. They were very badly damaged. And I remember not even realizing that I was in the parking lot to something that had previously existed. I thought this was just an extension of the parking lot, or maybe something that had previously been there. But so there have been other, and there's been plenty of other tornadoes. If you go on WX Twitter, you'll find threads upon threads upon threads of people discussing what they think, what they think was an EF-5 and what they think wasn't. But today we're here to talk about an actual rated EF-5, and we're going to start by just talking a little bit about the setup. We want to try and encompass kind of everything here, and we have myself and Trey who were chasing that day. We have Celton. Potentially we might be joined by Aaron Rigsby. He's got some other obligations ongoing right now, so he might not be able to pop in. But we want to kind of start by talking about the evolution of the day from the forecast to how, some of us chased it, and then we'll start diving more into the actual damage survey and all that fun stuff. But pretty straightforward day from my perspective and our perspective. Trey, I'll go ahead, and if you want to unmute here. So Trey and I were on a tour, Extreme Tornado Tours. I'm actually repping the brand right now. But we were, let's see, Trey, we had driven up the night before, and we had just gotten to the Bismarck area kind of late. We got like an LP supercell the night before. What was your kind of thought process going into the day, if you want to just kind of talk from your perspective a little bit, and we'll go kind of back and forth?
Yeah, so it was a difficult one because we started the tour in OKC. So we had a long way to get up there. We knew it was going to be a Northern Plains deal the next couple of days potentially. It looked like maybe a setup in Nebraska on the 19th, or in that general area, or at least we wanted to get there so we could make it up north for the following couple of days. So we stayed in I believe York, Nebraska the night before.
Talk from your
Looked like there was going to be a setup in North Dakota. Things kind of shifted into North Dakota on the 19th, so we hauled all the way up to Bismarck. And in the days leading up to the 20th, we knew it was going to be a very volatile environment, but it was very conditional because of some factors we'll probably get into here in a second. But we knew it was a chance of going huge. We knew there was going to be a target out west and the eastern North Dakota target. But it was quite difficult, and with a tour you have to make some decisions. So we knew it could have been a volatile day, but we kind of wanted to make sure we got the tours on the best chance of seeing supercells. And it was a difficult call that morning. I remember we kind of sat in the middle, and it was a very difficult call. But we eventually ended up going west, which was a mistake. But I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second how close it was to being almost a non-event, really.
And I'm seeing in the chat here that the volume's low. This is kind of a last minute thing, so we might have a few technical difficulties. Forgive me there, but the Discord audio should be a bit better now. But yeah, I'll kind of reciprocate that. I mean, I remember waking up. We were in Bismarck. We started the day with not really, we didn't really know exactly what we were going to do because we had to get the tours. Essentially, when you're on a tour, these people are coming from literally all over the world. And the way you chase is different than when you're chasing by yourself. You have to you have to factor in the fact that these people have 7-8 days, and we only have a few potential chase days. So we need to get them on a storm, and we kind of went back and forth. There were a number of things that were worrisome out east. A lot of the models had the 700 millibar temperatures pretty high, kind of to the point where we weren't really sure that we were going to get initiation. And that was the case for even chasers who decided to go east, because we did eventually end up going west for the more sure bet of storms. But Trey, do you want to discuss a little bit about kind of the our thinking with the 700 millibar temps, and whether or not we thought the shortwave would be enough to ignite something further east, and kind of our decision to go west?
Yeah, so let me share my screen here, and we'll pull up some data. But yeah, we started the day in Bismarck. We knew that out east there was going to be the conditional higher risk but lower floor target per se, and out west was going to be a more guaranteed target of supercells, because you had the upslope flow. The winds were flowing out of the east, so the higher terrain out in eastern Montana, northeast Wyoming, far northwest South Dakota was going to be it was going to be a little bit easier to get storms to go out there, even with the warm temperatures aloft. Out east, the 700 millibar temperatures, the models were hinting at pretty high 700 millibar temperatures. And just to kind of give some perspective there, I'm sure the folks out there have heard of the cap. That's kind of the level that the cap tends to show itself, 700 millibars. So we like to use 700 millibars as a proxy for whether or not the cap is going to be too strong or not. So the models were showing, 14, 15 degree 700 millibar temps all the way up into North Dakota in the days leading up to the event. Well, on the day of, here is the 700 millibars, and focus on these dashed red lines here. So this right here is going to be the 10 degrees Celsius and then the 12 degrees Celsius isotherm, line of equal temperature. And basically the threshold, as shown by John Davies, who's a really accomplished meteorologist who's done some work with this stuff, the threshold for when it becomes too warm for convective initiation is about 12 to 13 degrees. So we thought, it's going to be very conditional out east in the days leading up to the event. It's going to be very conditional because the models are showing, 14, 15 degrees, 700 millibar temperatures. But that ended up not being the case. So if you keep your eye on those red lines there, you see that 12 isotherm just barely creeps into southern North Dakota. This is at 23Z, so that's going to be 6 p.m. as storms kind of started to get going. So we were right on that threshold, between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius right there in southern North Dakota. So we were right on the edge, and the temperatures were just cool enough to get storms to go, which it was just a concern for us whether or not it would be that way, because we've, like Max said, we have a tour group who has a limited amount of days out there. They're spending a lot of money to see good storms. So you kind of have to make some decisions. We could, and, especially at the beginning of a tour when they haven't had chase days yet, or at least really good chase days yet, you're kind of struggling between, do we stay out east, potentially wait 6-8 hours and, twiddle our thumbs the entire day for nothing to happen? Or do we go out west where there's a more sure bet of storms? We still think there's going to be an all hazards risk, including a tornado threat, but it might not be as high ceiling as out east. So we had to make that call. We just weren't sure that was going to happen. So we ended up going west. Saw a great storm, but obviously once the reports came in from out east, it was a little bit difficult to handle there. But you mentioned the shortwave as well. So our trough out here in the Pacific Northwest, you see this little kink in the height contours there. When the 700 millibar temperatures are warm like that, you usually need a good bit of forcing to overcome that. That helps to lift and cool that warm nose, that capping inversion at 700 millibars. And we weren't sure if this shortwave was going to be enough. You could see it's very pronounced. So, it's not just some little tiny kink in the flow. You can actually see it there. But we thought, is this going to be enough because the 700 millibar temperatures were progged to be so warm? Is it going to be enough to initiate? So that was, we knew there would be storms out west with this amount of forcing on the higher terrain out west. Easy to get storms out here in eastern Montana, northeast Wyoming. But out to the east where you don't have the higher terrain and the temperatures might be a little higher aloft, was this going to be enough to erode the cap? We just weren't sure. So it was a tough call. And, if we could go back, obviously we'd play out east. But, we wanted to make sure we got storms for those guys. And fortunately, we were able to get some good days later to fill out their tour. But, it was definitely disappointing at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just one of those calls you have to make. But Celton, if you want to jump in here, if you want to talk maybe a little bit about kind of your guys' evolution of the chase and your thought process, we'd love to hear kind of what you were thinking.
Yeah, sure. So that day we had started, I was chasing with my buddy Jack. We had just come up from Oklahoma City, and I think we stopped in, what was it, Watertown or one of those other towns that was just across the border. And we made our way kind of towards the Jamestown area. It was kind of like a little bit of a middle ground point, and we were still kind of trying to decide whether we wanted to go east or west with that event, because like you said, there was some really warm 700 millibar temps that could possibly preclude storms from firing in the more volatile parameter space to the east. But we had lingered for quite a while, and as the day went on, more and more it became more and more clear that the 700 millibar temps were not going to be as warm as some of the models had predicted, and we decided to kind of stay in that Jamestown area. And within about an hour or so, we saw Cumulus Tower starting to go up directly south of us.
So, if my memory serves me correctly, and I did want to pull up radar data, but I was having trouble downloading GR stuff. But I mean, I don't know if we can see it here, but it was 7:30, 7:30 before we even had the first little blips going up there, kind of east of Jamestown. Um, was there a certain point where maybe you thought that, like, I don't know if this is going to go? What was kind of the moment you were like, oh snap, this is actually starting to happen?
I would say when we first started seeing those towers going up, I wasn't even expecting that to even happen. So when we saw those Cumulus towers starting to go up, I was like, oh snap, something, this is already more than I was expecting, honestly. It was kind of, in those types of setups where it's either boom or bust, you just kind of have to be there sometimes. And I was going into that day with the expectation that it was going to bust at first, but once we saw that, the excitement and kind of your expectations for it started to go up a little bit. Once we got under those storms here, let me see if I can share my screen real quick. There's screen one. Just pull this up.
While you do that, I mean, you can just see on this radar loop, even though it's a bit fast, I mean, just how quickly this cell goes up, and pretty much, I mean, not immediately, but it very quickly becomes a supercell and is probably tornadic within, what, less than an hour of initiating?
Mm-hmm.
Or around an hour. Oh yeah, look at
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, this is kind of what the storm's base looked like right as it first formed, and it looks pretty, but this is kind of not the look you want to see if you're looking for tornadoes. It's very smooth and laminar looking, almost like it's kind of in stable air. And one of the things I noticed is that this storm just kept pulsing up and down multiple times, like it was still struggling with an inversion or sin or something. Something just wasn't quite right with it. But I've never seen this happen before. But I think maybe 10, 15 minutes after I was shooting this time lapse, I looked back at the storm and it just absolutely exploded. I've never seen an updraft erupt that violently before in my life. Just unbelievable, especially like looking at the updraft tower. I've never seen something move like upward into the sky that quickly. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and I remember being further west, and our chase was kind of coming to an end, and we had been on a tornado, not a necessarily tornadic. I don't think it ever produced, but it was tornado warned for quite some time. Had some attempts, and we were calling it. We were getting ready for dinner, and I remember seeing that go up and how quickly it went tornadic. Trey, before we move on a little further, do you have any other notes about the setup or anything like that you want to add?
Yeah, I'll share my screen real quick here again, just to kind of bounce off of what Kelton was saying. It makes sense that the storm kind of looked elevated from the get-go, and even the SPC in their mesoscale discussion when those storms were going up, they said the storms actually might be elevated at this time. But if you look at satellite imagery, and I pulled it up on the Chase archive here, you can see all of these kind of stable rolls right where the storm initiated. And as you go forward, you see all these kind of cloud streets right there, which is an indication that you are still dealing with pretty good stability. But the storms ended up going up right on the north side of those stable rolls. So we were still struggling with some stability there while those storms went up, but eventually those kind of eroded, as you can see here, and it was off to the races. So really, it was one of those where we were literally right on the edge, maybe 1 degree or two higher 700 millibar temperatures, and this would have been a non-event. So, it's pretty amazing how right on the fence we were with this setup. And for those folks who went east, it was definitely on the right side of luck there. So
Even just looking at kind of that satellite loop, I'm seeing, you're not even getting that much interference with the anvil blow off from all the stuff out west, which ended up being a prolific derecho event. I remember the following day driving along the interstate, and we just kept finding areas of almost tornado level damage. I mean, that was in and of itself a prolific event. And I remember at one point, the SPC outlooks were kind of saying that, maybe more of the tornado threat is going to come from the line as opposed to, isolated tornadic supercells, but then throughout the day the wording started shifting more towards the potential for isolated supercells out ahead. But yeah, it was just kind of like the Goldilocks, I guess, of everything coming together. And Kelton, if you want to kind of just maybe briefly talk about Spiritwood, and then how you guys maneuvered to the southern storm.
Yeah, sure. Here, I can share my screen again. So within just a couple minutes of Jack and I getting on this storm, let me make sure the audio is muted. We kind of looked over at the updraft, and you can see just right away there's already a funnel starting to come down here. And this happened within, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes of that last image I sent you.
That's crazy.
Or showed you over the stream.
Even the just size of the updraft is so much bigger.
Yeah, I've never seen a storm go from looking so laminar and elevated to clearly producing a tornado like this so fast. And if I can scroll ahead real quick, just a couple minutes later, you've already got a pretty stout tornado developing here. So we were kind of driving north, approaching it from kind of in the RFD here. Something else that was really notable about this first tornado near Spiritwood, I've hardly ever experienced an RFD this strong. It was like pushing my car around almost off the road at points. My 360 cam almost blew off the roof of my car. It was ridiculous. I'm not sure what kind of dynamics or whatever was at play to cause that, but definitely one of the most violent roof length downdraft surges I've experienced.
And just huge, like it just looks like it's just a massive circulation. Yeah, if you want to
you
play
can kind
through
of get
some
a
of that
better
video,
view of it here. This was kind of spooky in the moment. You kind of got these rapidly rotating rain bands circling around the entire mezzo here. So this was a little bit unnerving because it makes you think, is this whole thing a tornado as opposed to just the visible part you can see here? So this was kind of like a little bit of a warning not to get too close to it. And from here on out, it just rapidly strengthened. It started coming back down, and then here it's a pretty stout cone stovepipe type tornado. And another thing with these tornadoes, they were moving extremely slowly. At least this one was for a while. It was almost stationary.
Yeah, that's just a monster. Yeah, so this is when Trey and I were beating our heads against the wall and maybe saying a few choice words. But
yeah,
that's
I literally punched the side of the van with my fist.
Oh no.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
yeah. Thankfully, it didn't leave a mark, but yeah, I had to let out some anger.
We were
Yeah.
hurting, and part of me was like, okay, we missed this tornado. I kind of figured that the line was going to overtake these storms. I wasn't even really paying attention at the time to the fact that there was a second supercell down to the south, and sometimes it's just that lead supercell that's able to produce, and then the southern one maybe gets choked off by some cool air from the rear flank, or sometimes the SIN starts filling in and they kind of just choke off and become more elevated. But that was not the case. What was kind of your guys' evolution from this tornado wrapping up? When did you decide to leave this storm and go to the southern storm, Kelton?
Okay, so another thing that was kind of interesting about this one is it was only photogenic like this for maybe a couple minutes. I'm not sure if it was the southern supercell that was like the precipitation from its forward flank started raining on this, or if this was just a wet RFD surge or what it was. But this tornado started to get heavily rain wrapped to the point where, like I said, with that very clear, extremely wide wind field surrounding it with those rain bands, I wasn't comfortable being this close to a tornado this strong that I couldn't see anymore. So we decided to back up and bail off of it. And then later on, further to the east, you can see here it roped out as this very, very tall occluded tornado. One of the more beautiful rope outs I've ever seen from one like this. Following this tornado, there was an anticyclonic one. Let me see if I can find the video.
Look at that excited boy right there.
Yeah. So immediately after Spiritwood, just off to its, I think it was to the southeast, we got a quick anticyclonic tornado that formed. This is my buddy Jack's footage. He's shooting on a VHS camera from I think the 90s.
Retro.
Cool little stuff. So this one put on a little show for a while. We didn't realize this was anticyclonic in the moment, but there was this tornado for a little bit, and then following that, there was a big tornado. I think it was near Valley City. I think it was rated EF2. You can see a shot of it in the lightning there. It's a pretty large wedge tornado. At this point, it was starting to get dark, and for safety reasons, I did not want to be north of a tornado this significant, especially after the first one had occluded to the north like that. So we started playing the chase a little bit more safely after that, and that kind of brings us on to what we did after. So after this tornado had finished and it had gotten fully dark, we started moving south towards the other supercell that was, I think, near Fort Ransom at the time, or near that area. And we decided to drop south towards that area. Let me see if I can pull up my Google Maps here. So I think it was, on 32? Yeah, we dropped south on Highway 32 here off of Interstate 94 towards Lisbon. I think the Fort Ransom tornado had just lifted. Got gas quickly, and the storm at first kind of looked a little bit elevated or smooth, like laminar looking, and I knew that the convective inhibition was only going to get stronger as the night started to progress. So I figured, oh, it's probably done. 9 times out of 10, that's just what happens after dark with these storms. They start to get elevated as that convective inhibition starts to build in. But pretty quickly, I was looking at the radar and then looking out at the storm in front of us, and we could tell that something was going on. And we decided to drive east here until, I forget the name of this highway here, but we turned north here on, 140th Avenue towards the Enderlin Sheldon area, and within just a couple seconds, let me see if I can find a good freeze frame, we can already tell that there's a pretty large wedge tornado on the ground, and this was the beginning of the Enderlin EF-5.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting how quickly these storms kind of went from laminar, maybe not so impressive looking, to violent tornado producing supercells. I mean, I think that probably also goes to show just that kind of Goldilocks environment that was in place that allowed for these storms to still, maintain themselves. And there's probably more that can be discussed with that. But this was the road that most chasers were on, if I'm not mistaken. It feels like most of the views are from this relative angle, and you guys just pretty much kept going north after this point.
Yeah, so we kept following it for a while on north on this road. I believe that there was a bit of a road hole directly east of this that was kind of preventing us from taking other roads. This was kind of like the last north-south road we could use here. I might be wrong with that, but we could just get more and more quick little shots of it off in the distance, and it's hard to see these things at night, but it was pretty clear what we were seeing.
Oh yeah,
was a wedge tornado in progress, and I think right around here or just before, if I can quickly get the shot with the lightning right there, this is right around when it's hitting the train with all the cars.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that in a minute, but that's the primary primary reason for the upgrade. So yeah, if you want to just forward through the video a little bit, just kind of maybe skip a little ahead and show the evolution of it, because it formed, it very quickly became violent, and then it pretty much like immediately started occluding due north, and then even wrapped kind of back around to the west and northwest.
Yeah, so there was a burst of rain that prevented us from seeing it for a couple minutes, but once we popped back out of it again, the storm was clearly starting to occlude. If I can get a good freeze frame in here. See if I can get one. I think it's coming up in this clearing up ahead.
A lot of annoying trees on that road from most people's perspective.
Oh yeah, it's just the worst. It's like, why of all places right here? Let's see if I can get a good frame in here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so kind of like right in here, you can tell that the occlusion process is starting to get underway here. There's obviously you can see the wedge here, and then this blew my mind when I first watched this footage back, but you could see how tilted the updraft is right above the tornado.
Yeah, just that whole tornado cyclone pretty much.
Yeah, it's just like a barrel just going up thousands of feet into the atmosphere, and you can see all that classic, like just slanted edge, that left edge.
And then it just kind of
So
kept constricting, and yeah, you guys had a pretty good view of it for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, so this thing was oddly enough with the storm. I think the storm was mostly moving due east. This tornado, I think, was moving almost due north most of its life, at least the portions of it that we were seeing. And you can just more of that just extremely tilted updraft right above the tornado. I've never seen anything like that before.
Oh, perfect.
We can quickly skip ahead. It just continues to constrict over time. And you can see here that tube aloft as it was starting to fully occlude and rope out just to the north of Enderlin.
Yeah, and it's pretty apparent in the radar. I wish I was able to pull up GR and kind of show it. I don't know if anybody else was able to find any good loops other than that low res one on YouTube that I found. But I mean, it's super apparent. The tornado very quickly just shoots to the north while the parent supercell is still kind of trucking along to the east northeast. But how long was this tornado on the ground for? I didn't even really look at that.
It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. I mean, even just like this condensed like bit of footage, I think total the amount of raw footage I got from it was like 12 to 15. So I would say no more than that.
And became violent, even all the way up to EF-5 level in the first, 3, 4, 5 minutes of its life, I guess.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So I think that's about it for that.
Let me pull up the radar.
Yeah, if you've got it.
I do have it, Max.
We got Will of TornadoTRX here coming in clutch with the radar.
What was the date? 6
would
June
have been
20th.
Yeah, might have been 6/21 if you're going by.
Yeah, I think it was after 0Z,
UTC.
so you might have to.
Right.
21.
What was it, like Tuesday? I'm thinking Tuesday.
While you're finding
Are you looking on
like
the
just-
VR
It would
radar?
have been like maybe about 4Z.
Yeah, I use Supercell WX now. We're plugging our boy Dan here, but let's see.
Oh, there we go.
Archive. This is prior to initiation, right? Yeah. Is that initiation?
I think it was a little further
This
north.
is 2 a.m. Am I missing? Oh, this is CDT, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
actually gonna be what time? Like 7 o'clock?
7:30 was initiation, I believe.
Let's go to 23.
Yeah, I think it was like 7 to 8 o'clock for initiation, and then I want to say Enderlin was
Oh, here we
around
go.
11 o'clock.
Yeah. So I move this windows around a little. Oh, there it is right there. So yeah, that's the tornado. What's so interesting to me about it is like how there's so little rain. Like the velocity almost can't fill in all the way. And that's it, including.
Yeah, and you can see that little burst of rain you were talking about, Celton. I don't know if that's another little updraft or if that's just a little bit of a wet rear flank thing. I mean, it seems to just be on the rear flank of the supercell.
There's like an extra, which you kind of see this sometimes like Pilger in other storms, where it's almost like convection. That's like I guess I don't even know, RFD convection or something, because it's like kind of like stuck on the hook, like the back of the hook.
And the northern portion of that hook there that you can see quickly occlude to the north, that's the tornado down there, not the higher DBZ blob south.
Yeah, so I'm almost wondering if that's a new updraft that's just going up on the roof flank downdraft surge.
That would be my guess.
It's almost
It might have played a role in maybe nudging it toward tornado genesis. It's very subtle, but it might have played a role there.
And then you had the following tornado, which was deviant in the complete opposite way, right? I mean, that's even another weird thing that.
Yeah, that's what made the this day kind of a little bit dangerous to chase, because you would have one tornado that would kind of go on an arcing path to the north, and the next one would dive to the southeast, and then the next one would go off to the north again. It was just very inconsistent, deviant tornadoes.
And I'll pop
Where's
back
the
over
EF2
here.
on here? It's because this
It's
is
kind of hard to
this is-
see in the velocity and reflectivity data, but it happened immediately after Enderlin.
Because we can see here on the track, this is
Probably
obviously the
this
track of
one
the
right here.
Enderlin tornado right here. And then this is the EF2 that we were just talking about that is diving hard southeast immediately following the Enderlin tornado. Can we really see it on velocity, or is it just too...
I mean, I think it's like this right here. It's
Yeah.
like what's it called? What is it called when it flips on itself? It's folding, but
Range folding.
yeah, but I think it's like right here, because like you have your very obvious couplet here, and then you have something
Oh.
right here, and then so I think it's like it might even be this, though it didn't hit Sheldon, but yeah, what an insane structure. Look, that's what an EF-5 looks like on radar. For our supercell looks like on radar.
And you can see how close, if you zoom back out, how close that line is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and that, you know, in its own right was a pretty historic derecho for the area. Like I was saying earlier, significant wind damage and probably some embedded tornadoes in that. Yeah, any final thoughts, Kelton, regarding just the chasing aspect of this before we start moving more towards the damage side of things and the rating?
I would just say how sneaky the tornado was that immediately followed Enderlin. I had no idea that was in progress at the time. It wasn't until weeks later that I checked my rear dash cam, which is kind of similar to what happened with Greenfield, but I looked at the rear dash cam and you can clearly see that there's another cone that formed immediately after Enderlin that's moving towards the southeast. Just a super dangerous situation there where it's very hard to see. At least I didn't catch it in the moment on radar or anything like that. It was just, I guess, situational awareness fail on my part there, but just a very tricky tornado to spot. But after that, our chase was just kind of getting out of the way of the derecho and trying to avoid all the wind damage and down power lines and stuff like that.
I remember Aaron, unfortunately, doesn't look like he's going to be able to join us. He's got some other stuff going on. But I remember calling him from our hotel in Bismarck after that. We were worried our hotel wasn't going to have power because of the line that had gone through. I remember calling to see if they had power, and they were like the only hotel on our strip that had power, because we have to book these, you know, well in advance with all the guests that we have, and the whole street, you know, down the block was without power. And similarly in Jamestown, which was the closest large place to get gas, it's pretty remote out there in eastern North Dakota, even along the interstate. And I remember Aaron saying that he was parked at the pump and was waiting for the power to turn on, and I don't think it did. I think he just had to mosey on somewhere else. He just slept in the parking lot for a few hours. So yeah, super impactful.
Yeah, it was a lot of that was the reason what we were just trying to avoid and get out of there. Jack and I had no idea that the Enderlin tornado had hit anything at the time, which was a complete surprise to hear about the farmstead, and then obviously months later the EF-5 upgrade. I never would have thought it would have been that tornado.
I'm gonna just back over here.
But I think that pretty much summarizes our story of chasing that event.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm gonna see if I can pop back in here on the camera. All right, so hello everybody. Now we can kind of move into the aftermath, and Ethan, we can jump over to you, because you posted something within a couple days of the event that was, you know, now looking back at it, pretty impressive. Do you want to maybe just talk about like what went into that? I wish we had Aaron so he could show some of his drone video. I mean, maybe we can share it and he won't get mad at me, but
yeah, well, I mean, I have the survey downloaded here that we can take a look at if we want to just start with some of the
let's do it.
Imagery. So, obviously the 2 points of interest in the path are early along here, um, along the railroad, where we had the train that was lofted and thrown into the adjacent field. So you can kind of get the wide shot here that uh, Aaron got with his drone. And it's kind of interesting to see here kind of like the progression or the gradient of damage where you have the initial cars. Granted, these earlier grain hoppers were fully loaded, which takes the weight of the train car itself, like it almost 5 times its weight. And then the lone tanker car way off in the distance that was empty. It was not at capacity. And thankfully, because of Aaron's drone work, I was able to pull the serial number and the manufacturer off of the tanker car and just kind of do a really quick analysis, just a quick force of drag equation analysis. Really easy thanks to the simple shape of the car. And I had all of the kind of inputs to plug in. Very simple bending of moments to kind of, relate the weight to the force of the wind. And then a simple force of drag equation to really flush out an approximate velocity. Granted, this is making assumptions that, this is an evenly distributed flow. There's no lift component. It's a pretty simplified analysis, but it can get you pretty much within the ballpark. And the fact that we were able to get, very close to, both the eventual official figure associated with this DI, as well as, just being overall well above that EF-5 threshold, at least in my eyes, confidently, rendered this as an EF-5 candidate to me. And, just kind of zooming out as a whole, we kind of look at the path and, people are drawing the comparisons to Greensburg and some of these other notable tornadoes with the big, sweeping hook, if you will. And, I think something to bring up here, environmentally that day, I have Kyle Gillette's Sounder Pie sounding from that day, from out in front of that supercell. And it's worth noting just because of I've made a couple of videos about chaser safety. And I think this really kind of is a prime example for, the deviant tornado stuff that Celton was talking about and some of the stuff that, folks like Cameron Nixon have gotten into, where you have that tug of war in the low levels of, your slow forward storm motion, but really strong low level jet kind of, playing that tug of war with the tornado. And, fortunately, no issues with chasers or anything like that there, but just kind of an interesting event overall. And it seems like some of these really strong low-level jet type style cyclical tornadoes are the really strong beastly ones that, are, EF-5 type candidates in the end. You think of some of the other notable examples from earlier in the year. April 27th comes to mind with that cyclical supercell in the Sandhills, and that one planting multiple wedges throughout the night. So something about that really strong low-level jet cyclical supercell is just, kind of ramps these storms to the next level.
And I'll pop over here real quick. I'm sure Aaron won't mind. Go subscribe to Aaron. Get him to 50K. He's almost there. But this is just a little bit more context in, these tankers, and then this one that you said, this one was not fully loaded, right? The one that got tossed pretty far out into the field.
Yeah, that one was empty.
So you can see, a more standard derailment with these, and then closer to where the core of the tornado was, the way these just get dragged out, and then this one gets flung hundreds of yards out into the field there. Thanks, Aaron. Sorry you couldn't join. So what about some of the other damage indicators? Obviously, we were talking about a second ago, it did impact a farmstead. And I guess there was the tree stuff as well, if you want to just kind of touch on some of those.
So I was going to touch on the tree stuff a little bit, just because of the fact that, we often talk in these kind of damage circles about contextuals and kind of using these, other DIs in order to really confirm ratings. Here, particularly, this was ultimately rated EF4, but I think just really goes to show the strength of this tornado. A whole tree with root ball pulled out of the ground, debarked. This is not something that you see with, your, I would say, lower end EF4 tornadoes, kind of those 170 to 180 type EF4s. This is, consistent with a tornado that would traditionally be an EF5 candidate. And then, kind of getting into more of the tree damage where there's debarking. And then, of course, the photos aren't tied to the farmsteads here at the moment, but you can actually see that in the satellite imagery here, the remnants of the two farms that were impacted. These out barn structures, they're not going to survive much, but, some of these, actual wood framed house constructions, depending on anchoring techniques, are going to, meet that kind of EF4 threshold. The one kind of on the right side of the core flow, so more of that stronger side of the tornado, rated at 180. So yeah, just a beastly tornado. And honestly, it with that tanker car, obviously, I always thought that it had EF5 capable winds, but it's really interesting to see that, this is maybe the new precedent moving forward, and using, untraditional DIs outside of the confines of the scale to, start looking at some of these large scale tornadoes and giving them the rating that more accurately depicts what their peak wind speed was capable of.
And I think we should touch on that, and anybody who wants to jump in can. But when we're talking about, contextual DIs, we're essentially saying that we could even probably pull up the list, but there's a set list of damage indicators that was implemented with the EF scale that you can assign ratings to based on how well they match, essentially. And what we had here was an example of something that does not fit on that scale, that does not have something that directly attributes to it on the EF scale, but other methodology was used in order to, reach this assumed wind threshold of EF5 well into the EF5. I know a lot of you guys are more versed in just tornado damage in general and ratings and stuff like that. If anybody wants to just kind of chime in on kind of how different this is from a lot of other, especially a lot of other EF5s that we had, because if you look at most of the EF5s in the last decade plus, prior to the last decade, we have them going through large populated, metros, and lots of potential damage indicators for the EF5 threshold to be reached. And then we have this example where it's in a very rural area comparative to, Joplin, Moore, any of the tornadoes on April 27th, 2011. So if anybody wants to kind of share their thoughts on that or discuss any of that further.
Yeah, I mean, at least with this, the only other tornado that I can think of that's been rated EF5 in the past based on non-standard DIs is what, Piedmont with the oil drilling platform?
Yeah, that would be, yep, Piedmont.
Did that didn't have any other? It was solely
Piedmont
based on
didn't.
that. I didn't know that.
Piedmont
Yeah, I
had
thought
like
it was just the platform.
like 30 slabs or so, but they were all like really, really poorly built. But I think with the oil derrick, it's one of those things where it's like, this is arguably like the strongest DI ever. So like I think it's fair. Like I think it's hard to debate it unless you're just going based on like tradition. And then I think what's interesting is like we really arguably haven't had that since Enderlin. Like there's a point to be made that the like contextuals, it's like why did we drop the contextuals and then suddenly pick it back up for 2025? Like, I think that's what a lot of people are mad at. I think I even made a tweet kind of inferring that. And it's like why did we stop in 2011? And then I think what people draw a line for like contextual rating is El Reno, right? Because in 2013, it was EF5, and then they were like, no, we don't use contextuals. There was no DI. But if you really look into it, it's like, what else is a slam dunk. Like Enderlin is a slam dunk. Like I'm sure Ethan can agree. It's like a very much a slam dunk EF5 calculation. I mean, it's like what the parking stops in Greenfield. I think I could think of, a dozen reasons that that's not exactly the best methodology. You can
Yeah.
go, Ethan.
Yeah, I would definitely I know because people like to nowadays point at that, and maybe I kind of birthed this monster in the sense with Greenfield. But yeah, no, I think just because, I mean, with what's happening at the ground level, like you have to worry about like boundary conditions and stuff, like with stuff that's that low to the ground. So, the parking stops I don't think is as bulletproof of an argument as, obviously a tanker car getting thrown 400 plus feet from its tracks.
Well, in the
Really,
Mayfield thing, right?
Yeah, and so yeah, you have the Mayfield train. Everybody's pointing that back to that now. And just today, I was decided to take a peek at it, and sure enough, I kind of ran the numbers quickly on it, and with an empty grain hopper, those grain hoppers are actually way more easier to be thrown because of the fact they have a much larger platform area. Their coefficient of drag is much greater, so the wind has a lot more to work on. So when I ran the numbers on that, it came out to like 120 something miles per hour, which obviously isn't that impressive comparative to this big oil tanker being thrown, because those are a much heavier car when they're unloaded. So
You have to tell them
Enderlin, I think, is what's
what you
that?
said prior. Ethan, we were in VC when he was doing the calculation, and bro goes like, "Why did they give this EF2? That's like in like a silly voice." And then it turns out it
Yeah,
was EF2. Like maybe they did do the calculation.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a similar story once again where I ran the numbers and I was like, oh, um, yeah, it very well could be the case that, I mean, it was assigned in other categories. So another example that, there are external considerations, but I think the big precedent that's being set here is that this is the ultimate classifier and that this was like, the top tier DI. And before this, yes, there might be DIs that fall into that other category that might have a little bit of external analysis involved as well, but they weren't ever the like make or break for a tornado's rating overall.
Yeah, it's exciting to see where tornado ratings are going to be going into the future now with them using possibly non-standard DIs in future tornado events.
I agree. I think this is, I think, I mean, at least with what I've been trying to do with the damage analysis series on my channel, it was just a way to, at first, kind of open up the eyes of outside of the EF scale and kind of look at things through a different lens. But I ultimately do think now that, kind of this more forensics based engineering approach where we're applying more to what we have for evidence available um, is the path moving forward. Because if the evidence is there, why should we let the confines of the current scale kind of box us into that narrative?
absolutely.
At
Yeah,
least that's
exactly.
It's good to
my
have
opinion.
it's good to have a baseline. So
Yes, for
what they
sure.
have now is good, but when there's other factors available, why not use them? It begs the question too:
Exactly.
are we going toward a point where we're gonna also add in things like radar data for mobile radars and such? That's been a hot topic of debate for several years now. So
Mhm.
hopefully, hopefully, at least there's some discussion on that soon. But
For
I
sure.
like this is a really good case, a really good step in the right direction, I think.
I wholeheartedly agree in that sentiment. And I think too with, kind of, branching out a little bit too. It's like, yes, the EF scale is actually really good at what it does for 98%, if not 99% of tornadoes. And it's that 1% case, the EF4s and 5s, where that's why we have, the quick response team and stuff like that to, be boots on the ground and provide that extra level of expert analysis. And, with this going the way it's has gone, and shout out to NWS Grand Forks for kind of initiating this type of bold step in this direction, but the new precedent is now set as far as I'm concerned.
It certainly was, and it was certainly a surprise for all of us yesterday morning to wake up and see that. And it's cool to think about where this could lead us. And even if, maybe even if radar data isn't necessarily something that can trigger an EF-5 rating, I think it should be at least included some asterisks to the side saying that there were, that per radar, maybe this could have been EF-5, but we're still going to keep it a damage thing. I don't know. I remember talking to James Ledoux, who was also involved in the rating of this tornado, and I interviewed him back in 2020, and they were, hard at work on the new scale that will eventually come out at some point. I'm not sure if anybody has any additional info on that, but he even back then was talking about how they were taking steps to, moving towards whatever the next rendition of the EF scale is. Trey, do you have any, or Trey or Celton, do you have any other thoughts about just kind of anything regarding this? I want to make sure everybody is able to talk about any thoughts that they had, what you thought at 10:30 a.m. yesterday morning, whatever you guys want to share, and then we'll probably open it up to some questions if anybody has questions in the chat.
Definitely not the text message I was expecting to receive that morning. Ethan texted me that morning, is like, congrats on seeing an EF-5, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, did Greenfield or something get upgraded? And I'm like, wait, what? Enderlin. Was Enderlin?
I thought it was a joke the first tweet I saw of it. I thought it was somebody just like going in and making a little edit, but then 9,000 other posts come through. How does it feel being the only one of us and many of our colleagues that have been chasing for a long time? How does it feel to be the only one with a EF-5?
Oh, I don't even know. It's pretty cool, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a number next to a tornado.
A little bit of bragging rights at the barbecue, but
oh yeah.
Let's see if we have any questions here in the chat. Feel free to drop them in. I'll try and see if anybody else sees anything or has anything they want to talk about. Feel free to go ahead.
What did Chris say? We should rate tornadoes off vibes. It's what I do anyways. Yes.
Classic. Yeah, just kind of a lot of back and forth.
June 1st, 2011 was an EF-4.
There's a question about was the train car in the air for the majority of it, or does it look like it tumbled? And I think just from remembering that drone we were just watching, it looks like it may have tumbled a little bit.
There was a little bit of tumbling, but there were large gaps in between. It wasn't like there was huge
rolling.
I feel like it was almost like I don't want to say like a skipping, but definitely it wasn't suspended for the full 470 odd feet.
But at the same time, wasn't just like rolling like a
Yes, correct. If it was like rolling, you would have much larger depressions in the field. Aaron's footage I think shows the couple impact points, but nothing, like I said, of substance.
Yeah, you don't
substance,
see
I should say.
Large drag marks going all the way out here, and I think there were some on the ground photos. I'm not sure if maybe you can see it here. Thanks again, Aaron, for letting me use this, even though I didn't ask. Yeah, I mean, hard to tell, but you can see there's not like a very obvious drag or rolling motion, and it's kind of displaced from where these are pointing, but
yeah, there's a couple divots here and there.
Let's see.
Well, those things are rated to survive derailments, so last thing you want is another what was that train in Ohio that derailed and you're dumping chemicals everywhere? Like, that's less than ideal.
East Palestine or something like that, or
insane.
Tornado Tyler asks, are there any other damage indicators from other tornadoes you think deserve to be looked at more closely? We talked about a couple of them. Are there any others? I mean, obviously we talked about Rolling Fork, we talked about Mayfield, we talked about Greenfield. All of those have things that have been debated heavily back and forth on Twitter and other various forums. Are there any other notable damage indicators that maybe could be representative of higher, maybe even if not EF-5, maybe even just like a level up in wind speed that you guys can think of?
I'm seeing people in chat talking about the Chapman tornado. I'm guessing they're talking about the rails being bent with that one.
Yeah, that's actually a good one that I would that's because that would be something that's like so non-traditional, but like, it would be a very difficult analysis to conduct. I know people have mentioned it to me a number of times, and I just like can't think of like an approach that would be, at least from a, just kind of like a ballpark, big picture equation type methodology, that I would be comfortable, because I've made this mistake before of like doing types of calculations that are a little too generous and a little too free flowing with the assumptions. I get comments all the time on the Rochelle video and the sidewalk pavers, and that's one that I kind of regret doing now. But yeah, so that would be one that, like, that DI, like if there would be like a full involved study into that one, that would be one that I would be super interested in. I think in terms of like non-traditional DIs that deserve a second look.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any others?
I honestly feel like that's the only one. Like, I mean, you can say things before the drought, like the Tuscaloosa train cars or bridges, and I'm sure there's plenty more. But like, if you really think about like after the drought, the only other one I can think of is in Greenfield. There was like a car lift that was like anchored with concrete into the ground. That's the only other one. Like, and I mean, I don't know anything about that. Like, that could be an EF1 DI for all I know. So like,
Yeah, I looked at that for the Greenfield damage analysis video, and I think the big thing, like the big issue with that one is like, given the fact that it is in the middle of a town, like debris impacts are a real possibility there. So I don't, like, I forgot exactly what I said. I think I tried to rule out some level of debris, impact, like, or at least a significant debris impact. But yeah, something like that would be fun because, those things are obviously very well anchored into the ground to support, vehicles being suspended. So definitely an interesting.
Speaking of, how debris is factored into, whether or not something was, whether or not it was because of the wind or whether it was because of debris impact. Do you guys have any additional insight into kind of how that is factored and considered? Because it's kind of difficult, like a tornado like Moore or Joplin, where it's completely debris loaded. How to distinguish kind of, those different factors. Are you guys familiar with any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what makes it. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, because that's an interesting, almost gray area when it comes to the scale, and it's kind of come down to office by office bases. Kind of the two prime examples you can pull up for either end of the spectrum. You got Moore in 2013, where you're in a very populated area. You have these a row of homes that all received EF-5 level ratings, and the argument could be made that yes, like that's an extremely debris loaded tornado. What contribution is that making? And then you had Valonia the following year, where windblown debris was a reason to withhold, or one of the multitude of reasons that ultimately withheld an EF-5 rating for that tornado. So it's like, all right, like where's the consistency? And it's like, yeah, debris impacts are very, like, there's no way you're ever gonna be able to like approximate or like come up with like a methodology of like kind of ruling it out, unless if it's something that's clearly in an open field. But at the same time too, it's like, okay, how much of this debris is actually playing a role in the destruction of the structure? Or
Right.
in the majority of cases, it's like you're getting a giant pressure differential anyway. The house is probably succumbing in some sort of fashion to the tornado before serious debris impacts are part of the failure. I mean, unless
Yeah,
if there's clearly a car in the house or something. But
that
yeah, so
was
it's a very wishy-washy
that was
gray
also
area.
something that was mentioned in Rolling Fork, I believe, and also that green apple florist, the way that the front face of the building, which had kind of like an awning and storefront type feature, like the way that was facing into, the inflow jet that may have
Hmm.
allowed that to, succumb
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, awnings and garage doors particularly are like, very common failure methods for a lot of these structures. Especially if they're pointing into kind of the if you're getting like inflow jet or, kind of the leading edge of the tornado kind of dragging under it, it's gonna, yeah, of course that's gonna be the failure point of the structure.
We have a couple other people talking about Diaz from earlier this year, as well as Bassfield from 2020. Any thoughts on either of those tornadoes? And we won't get to. We'll
I
we'll,
mean,
I
we'll
have a
kind of
lot
stop
of
it there
thoughts.
without getting into. We don't need to get into every potential EF5 thing that. But it's worth mentioning since we are talking about a bit more of an unconventional route for rating this tornado EF5. I think it's worth discussing a little bit, maybe some of these other ones and some of our thoughts. But once again, I should emphasize that we are just, this is all conjecture. We're just having a discussion here. The ultimate rating is assigned by professionals, and we respect that rating, even if we personally, have differences with it. I personally don't really get into the damage stuff that much, which is why I have all these wonderful people helping me discuss this who are much more well versed. But we'll kind of maybe end that tangent on if anybody has anything to say about those two tornadoes.
Well, I think the biggest thing I'd have to say is like I have subscribers on YouTube, so I am actually an authority of information. Kidding. But I see Diaz, like I think it's been like you said like 50 times in this chat now. I don't understand the obsession with Diaz other than the fact that like it was just a really good house, but it was one house, all the debris was right next to it. So it all went down in one blow. And like there's very obvious like glaring red flags. Like there's termites on the sill plates. I'm sure Ethan knows how important that is. Yeah, termite damage. Not all the bolts were bent. So load was not completed for every bolt. That's something that like we see with Smithville, for instance, like every bolt had some sort of stress. So we know that load path completed. So there's red flags with the DSDI. It's like I don't know why people think, like this should have been the next, EF5. Like it's a good DI. Like it's one of the better ones, and I think the high EF4 is a good rating. And then
Yeah.
with what was the other one? Bassfield. I mean, the Bassfield cabin again, good DI. So many red flags, and I don't think any of the bolts were bent on Bassfield. That means the load did not go to the bolts.
Yep.
Ethan, you can correct me.
Yeah, no, I don't believe they were, because I mean I think the sill plates stripped away before the yield or the bolts yielded, and that's a key thing is like what Will mentioned is like the completion of the load path where um, once you see those actual anchor bolts start to exceed their yield strength, then you know that the um, load path was completely transferred to the foundation. So, but yeah, I agree with Will's sentiments there with respect to those two tornadoes.
Yeah, I mean,
Someone
even
said
with the
Marion in chat.
Marion.
Not Marion. Marion is not an EF5, guys.
Yeah, for me, honestly, the tree damage immediately following the cabin is more impressive than the cabin itself from Bassfield. I mean, you hardly ever see tree damage that extreme from any tornado. Just one of those classic ones where it's very likely that was an EF5 strength tornado that just didn't hit the right damage indicators to get that rating.
Moving
I mean,
slightly.
Bassfield is
Oh, go ahead.
insane. Sorry, Max. I was just gonna say it's like arguably one of the strongest tornadoes in the last 10 years. Like I'll go say that. Like it's like just very clear from all the like contextual evidence we have. If I was on the survey desk, I'm not giving it an EF5. I'm not even giving like they're very generous. Like there's some tree damage and stuff that like it's like oh they're pretty generous to Bassfield here. So definitely not an EF5 rating.
That's another thing that's kind of being mentioned in chat is other potential DIs. Somebody mentioned ground scarring, which I know is something that people bring up a lot, but that's pretty subjective to what type of ground it is, you know, what type of soil you're working with. And then a lot of people also talking about trees. We were just kind of mentioning that, like what is the threshold for a DI like that? Because the trees were mentioned in, you know, in Enderlin. How high can you really take something like that? Does anybody have any thoughts on those two potential damage indicators, or
Trees
any
are
others?
So tough.
It seems
like trees
seems very like difficult to,
because they're so like
They're super
not-
variable.
yeah,
They are
they're the
trees.
variability. I was gonna say not uniform, but variability is the exact word or variable is the word that I'm looking for. But yeah, it's like you need the accompanying. There's a reason why there's like the idea of like the contextual idea in place where, you know, you kind of have to have the marriage of the two. They kind of the mutual, you know, the mutual relationship that they have together to kind of confirm your rating. But yeah, trees are an interesting rabbit hole. And the other thing is too is that I don't think there's so much more understanding of like structural behaviors than there are like trees and wind. Like there's not, like, I've gone down the rabbit hole before. There's not a lot of strong concrete research in terms of like tornadoes in trees and also soils and stuff like that. Like I know trenching is always something that people love to talk about, like tornadoes trenching, and it's like people, I mean, it's understandably like an extremely impressive thing to talk about, but like just how like the math to like go into that is like so abstract, and
Yeah.
it's like almost like impossible to like really quantify. You just know it
Trees
happens in the
are-
most extreme cases.
Trees are
Yeah,
so
for
cool
sure.
to me because like they actually are, if you're gonna argue besides like actual DIs, they should technically be like the top of the contextual list because they're the only natural thing that's anchored to the ground, you know? So it's like it's not gonna start like a car. I can never get behind like a car DI past like EF3 or so because you never know. It's so many variables. But
Yeah.
then trees, they're still contextual. There's so many things. Like the amount of debris, like debarking is silly because it's like debarking after Greensburg is some of the most extreme debarking we've ever seen. Well, it's because it just took all the town's debris and shredded the trees right outside the town. Yeah.
It's
And then
also
you have something
relatively
like,
slow moving.
yeah, you have something like Enderlin that has like hardly any debarking. I don't think that's because Enderlin was weaker than Greensburg. I think they're probably at the same intensity EF-5 wise, but Enderlin has no debris. It has like maybe one house that it hit, earlier, like so it's not gonna have much debarking. And then I saw people pointing that out that like Enderlin trees are, unimpressive. It's like, well, first of all, how many North Dakota trees get hit by violent tornadoes? So you have to think about that.
How
But then
many trees
also
are there
like,
in North Dakota?
yeah, how many? Yeah, for sure. And so like, trees are so cool and interesting to me. I know there's people that like they think that they're tree experts, as in like armchair people. They think that like
Oh,
Did we lose?
Will, I think we lost your audio.
We lost your audio. Oh no.
Rip.
Yeah, his audio
F.
died.
Here, while you're working on that, Trey, I have a question for you. You obviously spent quite a bit of time working with radars, with mobile radars, with with Howie Bluestein, and I was curious if you have any just thoughts or insight on radar and using radar measurements, or maybe radar correlated to damage, if you did any studies or paperwork on that or anything in that realm.
I didn't really do much as it correlated to damage. One of my fellow students who worked for Howie, Zach Wienhoff, he was a PhD student. He actually switched from OU to go to Illinois to actually get into engineering and tornado damage. So I'd have to ask him about that. But if they're ever going to add mobile radar into the list of DIs, you're going to have a lot of strict criteria that have to be met. distance from it, how high is it scanning, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a challenging prospect that they're going to have to look at. I know it's been, like I said, it's been talked about forever. Back when I was at OU in 2019, 20, Zach and I would have discussions about this, and he said, yeah, they're working on it, but it's going to be a while. So it's a difficult prospect, but if you have good radar data for a certain case, why not use it if certain thresholds are met? And I know the argument against it is you can't have a mobile radar in every single tornado, so that it's kind of that's the difficult part about it. But just like this, when you have contextual DIs, use them. When you have mobile radar data that can meet certain thresholds, why not try to at least factor that in? But you'd have to have a lot of strict guidelines that have to be met for that. But hopefully they can look at that in this updated EF scale and at least factor it in somehow. If it's not a full DI, okay, but at least like you said, let's maybe put an asterisk by it. This tornado was measured winds of 290 miles an hour, but like an El Reno case, they had plenty of mobile radar data for that case that showed that it was well into EF-5 range, but of course, we know it didn't hit much. So I think that's the way to go with it.
Somebody asked if there's been an EF-5 in North Dakota. There's not been an EF-5, but there's been F-5s. And this particular tornado, the Enderlin tornado, was on an anniversary of the Fargo F-5 from, was it 1957?
I think so, yeah.
That was a pretty remarkable tornado in the sense that, that was one of the earlier Ted Fujita, really going and mapping out everything and just, doing what he does.
I'm still, just to talk about the Fargo tornado briefly, arguably it's you could, talk about, the tornadoes that hit Tinker Air Force Base, but in terms of, it really, advancing the understanding of, tornado meteorology, I don't think there's a more important tornado than the Fargo F-5 in 1957. That was really what sparked the interest for Fujita, and I don't think we're talking I don't think any of us are sitting here talking about this type of stuff without that seminal moment.
Oh yeah.
In meteorological history, so it's just worth highlighting.
The fine
kind of
scale detail of his work with hand-drawn, just these super precise graphics. It's just incredible to imagine the amount of work that must have gone into that.
For anyone that hasn't seen the American Experience PBS episode on Ted Fujita, it's a must-watch for any
I remember
tornado fan.
I think we watched that in the vans one time on tour, Trey.
For anyone that
that's a real good
first Fargo video.
Really good episode.
Yeah, plug the June 1st Fargo video. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions in here that we haven't already there's...
Can I ask a question of Trey?
Go for it.
Or to Trey?
Sure.
Max, I'm hijacking.
Go for it. Take it away.
I was just going to... I know, I was kind of mentioning it earlier, and, Celton was talking about... I'm, fascinated by, the whole concept of, deviant tornadoes and stuff like that. Do you find it's, that correlation between, strong low-level jet plus slow storm motion type of thing that we've it seems to be talked about before? Because, in this particular case, we're, Celton's chasing at night, right? You don't want to be too close to begin with, but, easily if, someone's feeling a little overzealous, especially in, when Spiritwood was on the ground, and that thing, those slow tornadoes are the ones that seem to really kind of, catch people in a pickle sometimes.
Yeah, that's I think the number one thing is the slow storm motions. Because if you use that technique that Cameron Nixon and John Allen developed, you'd see if you did it on the sounding that the Kyle Gillette sounding that you showed, that vector's pointing straight north. The storm motion was very slow for that one, at least relatively speaking. So the slow storm motion definitely does it. I've heard, there could be some other contributions from stuff like, strong low-level shear, weaker mid-level shear. I don't know if that, I'd have to look a little bit more deeply into that. I took a quick look at the Greensburg proximity sounding I had, and I didn't really see that too much. But I think the number one thing is the slow storm motions with that. So yeah, anytime you have slow storm motions and that much low level shear, strong low level jet scenario, yeah, you got to be careful.
Will?
Yeah, I think one of the only other ones I can think of was the Greenfield day with the cold front pushing the tornadoes off to the east. That was another weird case.
Yeah, that was a really unique case. You don't see that often at all. But yeah, this usually it's going to be more dictated by the wind profile, and but that was a really unique case where you had actually just literally pushing the circulation along. The cold front was literally pushing the circulation along, which prevented deviance. Not that situation, not that setup favored deviance anyway, because you had those were much faster moving storms. So the deviant tornado motion vector was not that different from the storm motion vector. But yeah, that's a really unique case. But yeah, these cases where you have those really slow moving storms, those are the ones to watch out for. Those are the ones you're going to get once it starts occluding, it's gonna follow that low level flow, and then it's going to start orbiting around the mesocyclone. That's how you get the sharp hooks at the end of the damage track,
Yep.
like a Greensburg, like an Enderlin. It's like we said earlier, it started off moving northeast, and then almost immediately it started occluding and getting pushed by the low level winds off to the almost due north, and then it kind of came back around on itself. That's when it started orbiting around the mesocyclone right before it died. So yeah, it's really fascinating stuff.
Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to talk about. We've had some other questions in the chat that we've kind of already discussed, and some things that I don't necessarily know if we need to get too in the weeds on. Does anybody have any parting thoughts before we call this? And feel free to toss any other questions in the chat if it's something we haven't touched on. I know some of y'all are probably just joining in, and this will be available after the fact for anybody to go back and watch. But any parting thoughts from anybody?
Well, if we want to dive into like the political state of the U.S. right now, we could.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's end it on a really high note.
Yeah, really.
Celton's got the EF scale infinity gauntlet completed.
Oh yeah, I've got
Screw you,
them all
Colton.
unlocked now.
Yeah, that's I saw everybody posting that, and I mean that is actually a pretty cool accomplishment to get them all checked off.
Yep.
Well, I think we'll call it
I still
there.
don't have a 4. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it'll happen. It'll happen.
You got it. 2026, baby. I think we'll wrap it up there then. Thank you so much to all of you guys for taking time out of your evening to talk and share your expertise on various different fields. And thank you to everybody who tuned into this stream. Like I said, it will be available for anybody who got here a little late to go back and watch. And let me know if this is something you enjoy. I love discussing tornadoes and talking with my friends, and maybe in the future we could do more of these and maybe just talk about specific chase days. We don't necessarily have to delve into damage or ratings or EF scale. We could do more of these in the sense of a chase day that many of us were on, and just go back and forth and share our experiences and videos. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, especially more over the fall and winter when we don't have a lot of severe weather going on, that'd be something I'd be interested in doing. So thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to you guys for helping out with the stream.